fast forward that prompter there. There we go.
All right, so Climate Watch now. The Supreme Court has blocked an unprecedented climate change lawsuit in Oregon. Hundreds of activists rallied across the state Monday. That's when the trial was supposed to start, but the case is now back in limbo. The Supreme Court will now have to decide if the lawsuit can move forward. 21
young people, ages 11 to 22, are suing the federal government for failing to fight global warming. They first filed the suit in 2015 against the Obama administration, and ever since, the group has survived a series of hurdles. For more on this, we want to bring in one of the attorneys representing the group of young people, Phil Gregory. He is with us now on the phone from San Francisco. Phil, so good to have you. Your plaintiffs are essentially arguing a safe climate is a civil right. So why can't your team get a trial?
Well, you just talked about problems created by baby boomers. Well, this is a problem not only created by baby boomers, but a problem they can solve. What we have before us is the opportunity to take climate change to court. And all we need is an order from the Supreme Court allowing us to commence the trial. Once we commence that trial, we're going to be putting the climate science in evidence and showing why the young children of America and future generations are being victimized by this federal government.
So, give us your argument. What is your argument against the government here?
Essentially, the federal government has known since 1965 that business as usual emissions of fossil fuels will put our climate in extreme danger, and that it's gone on business as usual, accelerator all the way down to the floor, and as a result, these children and our posterity, something the federal government has sworn to protect, are endangered by climate change. The federal government admits we are in a danger zone when it comes to our climate, contrary to the statements of this president.
So what is creative lawyering, Phil? That's something that we've heard that they describe the way you're planning on taking the government on. Explain that.
Well, it's not creative lawyering. It's relying on decades of lawyering. So back when the NAACP took on school desegregation in the 40s and the 50s, what they were showing is that children in segregated schools were being harmed. And the Supreme Court in Brown versus Board of Education said that harm was a constitutional violation and required the school districts and other governing bodies to eradicate segregation. Well, we're using exactly the same blueprint. These children are being harmed by climate change. The federal government is substantially contributing to creating climate change, and as a result, it arises to constitutional dimensions because of the scope of the damage this youngest generation faces.
So listen, the Justice Department spoke to the New York Times and said that the case is unconstitutional. It's an unconstitutional attempt to use a single Oregon court to control the entire nation's energy and climate policy. What do you say to that?
The court in Oregon hasn't issued a single order that meets the criteria you just described. All the court in Oregon has said is, I'm going to take this matter to trial. It hasn't done anything that violates the Constitution. In fact, back in July, this Supreme Court said that the case should proceed. So we do not understand why we're facing a stay right now when we're relying on traditional constitutional doctrines, and the Supreme Court has already reviewed this matter and said, let it proceed.
Phil, this isn't just the Trump administration that's tried to dismiss this. The Obama administration did as well. So what are the next steps for your team moving forward?
The next steps are to make sure everybody out there recognizes the scope of the problem. And then we are going to be filing briefs in the Supreme Court in response to the government's petition to make sure the Supreme Court understands that we need a full evidentiary record. Hopefully at that point, the Supreme Court will allow this case to go to trial so that both the trial judge and the appellate court have a full record to make a decision on whether or not these claims are proper.
You know, Phil, some people are just going to see this as a stunt.
It's certainly not a stunt. Sit down and read the government's documents about what the government claims, because the Trump administration in this case, when it's under oath, says climate change is real, climate change is harming people, and climate change is being caused by the same conduct that the federal government is engaged in. So it's no stunt. What we're going after is what the federal government itself says is a huge problem.
All right, Phil Gregory, really interesting. We'll be following the case. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me on.